Casey. I wanted to talk today about the thought of channeling your creativity even among chaos. That is a theme that resonates with me. It's something I have definitely been dealing with over the past few years, and particularly over the past few months since my most recent ankle injury. I think my biggest challenges as far as channeling creativity goes has been my undiagnosed ADHD and autism. I went pretty much my whole life without suspecting that I wasn't neurotypical until I would say maybe my late 20s when I got pregnant with my son and was dealing with all of those hormones, and then my anxiety kind of erupted. I think it always been low-key there since I was young. I was a pretty sensitive child, and looking back, I can definitely see a lot of items that I struggled with, but was able to manage for the most part until I got older and life got harder and I had a lot more stress to deal with, and those hormonal changes that can come from pregnancy. And at first I was just thinking it was only anxiety and OCD and maybe occasional depression, which those tend to be things that run in my family. But over the past few years, I have realized that I'm most definitely ADHD. Got that diagnosed in large part thanks to my son's own diagnosis, even though it kind of manifests a little differently in both of us. And then, most especially when I figured out a few months ago that I am autistic. I'm definitely on the spectrum. And having that kind of missing puzzle piece to my own mental health has made a tremendous difference in how I'm looking at things and how I'm structuring my life. And hopefully that's going to allow me to tap into my creative side again. So for you, your challenges could be similar. You could also be neurodivergent like I am, or struggle with mental health issues. I have notes. Or it could just be the typical chaos of life. Maybe you're busy with children or pets, or you have narcissistic parents or a narcissistic partner, or maybe your career is very stressful, or you're in college or grad school and you're barely keeping things going, juggling multiple balls in the air. Whatever it is, you could have chronic illness and injury, like I have been dealing with twice in my life over the past few years. Whatever the case may be, I understand how hard it is to channel that creative side, your spirit that wants to create, whether it's writing or something else. I come at it from the viewpoint of being an author. I understand, and I just want you to know that you are not alone. You are most definitely not alone, and you're not hopeless. There is hope to figure out strategies and ways to keep tapping into that creative side. So that brings me to the question, how can we keep channeling our creativity even among the chaos? Well, let's discuss some strategies. This isn't an exhaustive list, I want to say first of all, and some of the strategies I mentioned may or may not work for you, and that's okay. But they could help get your creative juices flowing, and they could help you brainstorm maybe some solutions that would work for you. For me, I've found out that the first step is identifying my primary roadblocks. For me, the biggest roadblock I just mentioned is my mental health. Having that full picture, knowing now that I'm not just an anxious person. I don't just have OCD sometimes. I am not just ADHD, but I am in fact also autistic, has made a world of difference. Now that I know that a lot of what I was struggling with was sensory overload, having too many inputs that were just overwhelming me at certain times, in addition to some of the other things, is allowing me to figure out strategies for that. So that leads me to another point, figuring out resources and workarounds to either help me eliminate or reduce the resistance that those roadblocks create is pivotal. For instance, I use a lot of planners because of my ADHD, and maybe because of the autism too, I don't know, but definitely because of the ADHD. Like, if something's out of sight, it can be out of mind. And so having planners and going back to them and referring to them throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month can help me stay on target and help me keep accomplishing tasks and being creative. I actually use multiple planners. and I try to use them every day. When I'm using them every day, I am much more likely to stay on task, to stay on target, to be accomplishing those creative tasks that I want, as well as the publishing tasks that I need to. Whoops, sorry, phone's ringing. Nobody ever calls me until I'm doing something. Isn't that funny how that happens? I might edit that out later, but if I don't, oops, sorry. When I'm using my planners every day, I'm much more likely to stay on task. And for me, I'm trying not just to get back on the task with writing, I'm also trying to get back on track with self-publishing. And so I need that accountability of the planner reminding me what I'm supposed to be doing or what I want to do. But I also have to allow for flexibility within my plans. And saying that, I wanted to talk about the planning system that I personally use and that I like the best. No, she's not paying me to say this, but if you're familiar at all with Sarah Cannon, her Heart Breathings YouTube channel, her HB90 planning system is the one that I use. And it's on a 90-day kind of rotation where you plan for your next 90 days. You lay out 3 main goals that you want to accomplish, and then you break it up into smaller tasks. And that really helps me with, first of all, not getting overwhelmed. I am very prone to feeling overwhelmed. I think that's a common problem for people who are neurodivergent, as well as just neurotypical people too, but I can only speak from my own perspective, and I can get overwhelmed easily. So if I break things up into smaller pieces, smaller tasks, and do one task at a time, I'm not as likely to be frozen and overwhelmed and just not do anything. Executive function is a big issue for neurodivergent people, and so anything I can do to help head that one off at the pass and stay on track is really going to help me. So I love her HB90 planning system. Like Sarah, I also find it helpful to write things in multiple places. I've been recently binge watching a lot of her videos to catch up, and she's said that multiple times, and it resonates with me. I have multiple planners. I write things in multiple places. I mentioned earlier that out of sight, out of mind thing that can be a struggle for me and for many neurodivergent people. If I have it in multiple places, I can't just forget about it as easily or ignore it. I don't deliberately ignore things, but sometimes you're like, oh, I can just do that later. But if you have it in multiple places, you're like, wait a minute, this is pretty important. I set this as a goal for a reason, and so I need to get my butt on track with taking care of this. I will say, for whatever reason, I actually had never really tried her Kanban post-it note strategy. So I don't know if you can see, I've actually decided to actually give it a try this time. I'm gearing up for the second quarter of the HB90 system, so that would be April, May, June. But I started a little bit at the tail end of March because I finally have enough spoons from dealing with this injury to actually get things back on track. So I did go ahead and put some post-it notes up there. There's some cute little there's some cute little Hello Kitty post-its that I have from Erin Condren, so I just use those. I've had these for years and I never used them, so it seemed as good a time as any. Although I did go and buy some of the more typical square, brightly colored post-it notes that I'll probably use next time. But I'm trying it this time. I think that's something that is helpful if you're willing to experiment and try different things and figure out what does and doesn't work for you. Don't get hung up. If something doesn't work for you, that's okay. Let it go. But at least try it, because you never know until you do try it. I also say, like Sarah, I am also very much a visual person who loves bright colors. Maybe I'll show you later, but I have bright colors everywhere. I have a bunch of these different note cards that I'm using. I have notebooks, planners. I'll show you the whole gamut later. And I like to surround myself with bright colors and cutesy things. And I think this boils down to inspiration. So we'll say that's a second strategy for helping yourself stay creative among the chaos. What inspires you? What kind of surroundings inspire you? Are you a minimalist person? Do you need extreme neatness and tidiness in your workspace? Do you like dull or bright colors? Do you like dull or bright lighting? Do you like complete quiet when you're creating, or do you need heart-thumping music? That's usually me. I like the music. So just figure out what inspires you, and if you surround yourself with that kind of an atmosphere, you're more likely to be able to tap into that creative side. For me, it helps me channel my creativity because that just brings me joy and it inspires me, and it really makes me want to dive into the writing. Like, it just gets me happy, and it makes me excited to write, excited to create, excited to pour my thoughts and ideas out in the hopes that they're going to resonate with others when they read them. That's what works for me. So hopefully you can find something like that that helps you tap into that. Another strategy that really works for me is writing sprints. So you might also hear people refer to doing the Pomodoro method, Pomodoro, I believe, or tomato timer. Like, if you search for tomato timer or Pomodoro timer on the internet, you will find a little timer. And that just means you're breaking up your little tasks into writing. For me, it's writing sprints, but it could be anything. It could be cleaning, it could be doing art, it could be crafting, whatever you want to do. And you're going to sit down, and it's generally 25 minutes on of writing, and then a 5-minute short break. And then every 4 longer periods, you're going to do a longer break. You could also, if 25 minutes or 5 minutes, if that's not enough for you or too much for you, you could break it down to 20 minutes working, 10-minute break. You could do 15, whatever you need to do. You might also be able to start out with like not doing as much working and having longer breaks, and then slowly reverse it until your brain is able to create for longer periods of time. Whatever works for you. Another thing that I would recommend is figuring out what time of day works the best for you for accomplishing certain tasks. Maybe you're more of a morning person. That is not me. I am like the typical, many ADHD and or autistic people are not morning people. That is when I'm at my most autistic, and I'm not saying that in any type of pejorative sense. For me, when I wake up, that's when I'm most overwhelmed by all of the sensory input, and I'm groggy and like very confused. And so later in the day is better for me for accomplishing like higher brain power tasks, but maybe you're the opposite. And so then if that's the case, you might want to figure out what's harder for you or what you tend to resist more, and do those things earlier on. If you're like me, you do those things later on. You accomplish some of the easier, lower brain activity tasks earlier on. Another thing you could also do is, if you've ever heard of candy bar scenes, some writers will sprinkle candy bar scenes in between harder scenes. So if they have a scene that they're not as excited about, or that's for some reason is just more challenging for them, they'll do 1 or 2 of those, and then they'll allow themselves to write that candy bar scene, the fun scene that they've just been itching to write, and then they'll go back to one of the harder scenes again. And so you can do that with tasks as well. Like, tackle 1 or 2 of the harder ones, and then let yourself do something really fun. I think that ties into why Pomodoro works so well for me and some other people, is because you're doing the harder stuff, and then you're giving your brain a break. You're letting yourself have that moment of celebration of the task you accomplished by then doing something fun. You might not be someone who actually doesn't find that helpful. Maybe you're someone who needs to get in that flow and just keep going for a couple of hours, and then you can change tasks. That's okay. Figure out what works for you. And that brings me to saying this. We could discuss potential strategies all day, and hopefully we'll talk about some more in future videos. But I wanted to end this by talking about the third, I think, probably most helpful tactic for helping you tap into that creative mindset even in the midst of chaos. And that is always go back to the joy. What got you excited about creating, about writing, about doing art, whatever it is? What got you inspired about that and excited to do it in the first place? Always go back to the joy. Are you putting too much pressure on yourself? that can happen, as especially if you're start doing something like writing for a business side of things. Like for me, I publish. I don't just write for my own enjoyment. I publish. So sometimes I put a lot of pressure on myself. And having lost a lot of time due to grief and my mental health issues, not really knowing what was going on, I feel that pressure of, I had 3 books out from a big publisher. The series got canceled. I started an indie career and it was making inroads. It was starting to go up. I had developed a lot of newsletter subscribers, a lot of people that were excited for my books. And then I fell off of creating from a period of grief, later from shattering my first ankle, and then more recently from breaking another ankle. So I put that pressure on myself, and it's something I need to like get better at, and I'm working on. And goals can be great. I need to sit down and have these goals. I need to do the planning, but I also need to remind myself that don't get caught up in all of that. Don't get caught up in the imposter syndrome. Don't get caught up in comparing yourself to others and feeling frustrated that I'm not where I want to be. Comparison really can be the thief of joy. And so I need to focus on that joy. I need to push away that imposter syndrome whenever it comes knocking on my door, because there's a reason I am doing this. There's a reason I have gotten a publishing deal. There's a reason that I have had many people buying my books that I've indie published, and it's because I'm good at what I do. And it's okay to remind myself of that and to focus on the joy. And so I would just come to this final point. In those moments when you're feeling imposter syndrome, or you're feeling overwhelmed, or you're feeling like your life is too chaotic and you don't know how to focus on being creative, just stop, breathe, center yourself, return to the joy, tap into that love of creating. Try to push those worries aside. I know it can be hard, but those worries will be there later. The outside pressure will be there later. Think about those later. For now, just let yourself create. I promise you, you can do it. I know that you are an amazing creator. There's a reason you love to do it. There's a reason that you haven't stopped and that you keep coming back to it and wanting to do it. And just know that you can do it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please consider subscribing and please like the video, and I will create another one later. I'm gonna go right now and write because I'm focusing on that joy of creating myself. Thank you so much.
Up in the stars, that's where you are. Up in the stars.